Yeah, so the term adaptogen is actually pretty new. It was founded by a Russian toxicologist only in the 1950s.
Mm.
And so he defined it as substances that increase the state of nonspecific resistance. And so that kind of sounds like a bit of jargon. So, really, what that means is that when we're talking about the stress response in general, so the stress response is the way that our body deals with stress. So, there's kind of three phases of that. There's the alarm phase, the resistance phase, and the exhaustion phase. And so with the alarm phase, that's when the stressor occurs. And so I like to use the example of, you're starting to feel tired. And then the phase of resistance is going through that tired, but not getting to the point of the phase of exhaustion, which is like burnout and breaking down and just like the opposite of anything we could want. And so I really feel like adaptogens are amazing. And as I mentioned, they try to prolong that state of resistance. So that middle state before we hopefully ever have to deal with anything such as exhaustion. So overall, that's how it was defined. And I think that the definition is kind of evolved over time. And so adaptogens really are any sort of natural substance that falls into this category. And they really help the body facilitate its capacity to adapt to any sort of stressors. So that could be internal stressors like emotional turmoil, that could be external stressors, as well, like pollution, as well as food intake too, because sometimes we can have those inflammatory responses to food that doesn't respond well with us. So any sort of natural substances that fall into that category, so they could be herbs, they could be fungi like medicinal mushrooms, other plants as well. And so some of the most common ones I think now are ashwagandha that people are talking about, and then rhodiola, medicinal mushrooms, as I mentioned, so like reishi and cordyceps and chaga. And then there's also other ones like astragalus. Turmeric has also been big recently. So there really are just so many. And I think that people are getting more interested into the natural space and trying to see, how can I optimize my health and wellness? And so adaptogens really help the body maintain their overall, like, homeostasis is the technical term, but really it just means balance of the body and all of the systems. And that's really what we're looking for overall, is to have the most balance and have like the best possible life that we can. So I think that adaptogens can really help be a part of that. And if there's ways that we can integrate into our life, and I just think that there are so many different ways now. Yeah, I mean, I wish there was one specific compound or something that simple.
Yeah.
But I think the main thing when I'm thinking about adaptogens and the way that they work in the body on like that cellular level, I think that it comes down to inflammatory markers. And so there are quite a few inflammatory markers. For example, like if we're talking about supporting brain health with like a lion's mane or bacopa, for example, those in particular, they work on BDNF. And so that's brain neurotropic factor. And so that factor in general, as we age, the amount of that factor goes down just naturally. And so by incorporating various products, whether they are adaptogens, there's also other foods that are able to do that too, like blueberries is a superfood for a reason. So that also has some sort of impact on this brain-derived neurotropic factor. And it really is amazing for helping just like support overall brain activity. There's also been a really interesting discussion about the utilization of that for myelin. And so myelin is what kind of coats the neurons in the brain. And so it helps the signaling function the way it's supposed to. And just over time, that functioning is not as, vibrant or as vigorous as it has been years before. And so BDNF also plays a role in that. So that's just one of the examples. But I think that it comes down to trying to decrease the inflammation in the body. And I think overall inflammation gets a very bad rep because people are saying, oh, I don't want any inflammation. There has to be some inflammation because that's your body's natural reaction. But I think that the issue rises when there's too much inflammation, and then that just causes so many processes to go out of whack. And so really adaptogens are there to help our body build resilience against this just overwhelming or potentially overwhelming inflammation. Yeah, so I mentioned bacopa, and so blueberries I wouldn't necessarily say is an adaptogen, but I think it is a superfood, and some of the superfoods can function in that same way, but they're superfoods for other reasons. And a lot of the superfoods, I'm getting off topic here, but a lot of the superfoods are attributed to some like polyphenolic compounds is what's talked about. We can talk about that another time. So with adaptogens, though, there are so many other ones. So I mentioned lion's mane, bacopa. There's also just such an extensive list. So I mentioned astragalus, and then there is holy basil's another great one, and it's actually really interesting. There's ginseng and ginkgo. Ginseng in terms of like Siberian ginseng, and then also Asian ginseng, American ginseng. There's so many. And I think one of the most fascinating things for me as someone who is very interested in the herbal side, so many of these herbs that are being thought of and discussed now as adaptogens are actually herbs that have been used for thousands of years in traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda.